Welcome back to K-pop&Juice, where we don't just sip the sweetness of fame, we squeeze out the truth, pulp, and all. Today's story isn't loud. It doesn't come with scandalous headlines or flashing cameras. It arrives quietly, almost politely, the same way its subject often does. This is about the days Cha Eun-woo doesn't speak. The days when the smile is present, but the weight behind it is heavier than anyone wants to admit. This is Cha Eun-woo's silent days exposed. The hidden mental pressure behind the spotlight. And before we go any further, let me ask you something. Have you ever looked at someone who seems to have everything and wondered what it costs them when no one is watching? Cha Eun-woo has become a name that feels almost unreal. Face genius, nation's visual, idol, actor, brand ambassador, global star. His image is so polished that it sometimes feels like it was designed by a team of perfectionists rather than shaped by a real human being. And yet, that's exactly the problem. When perfection becomes the brand, where does the person go when they're tired, when they're unsure, when they're overwhelmed but still expected to smile? From the outside, his life looks like a dream that never pauses. Packed schedules, international flights, dramas, albums, fan meetings, interviews, photo shoots, endorsements. The applause never really fades, it just changes locations. But behind that constant motion lies a quieter reality that fans only catch glimpses of, moments where his voice lowers, his words slow down, and his eyes seem to say more than his mouth ever could. Those are the silent days. And silence, in this industry, is rarely empty. It's usually full of pressure. Think about how Cha Eun-woo entered the industry. Even before debut, he was labeled. Not just talented, not just hardworking, but beautiful. That label followed him everywhere, growing louder with each passing year. At first, it opened doors. Then it became a standard he could never escape. Every performance, every role, every public appearance came with an unspoken comparison. Does he still live up to the face? Does the acting match the visuals? Is he more than just looks? Imagine waking up every day knowing that millions of eyes are measuring you. Not just your work, but your expression, your posture, your tone of voice. Imagine knowing that a single tired look could be interpreted as arrogance, sadness, ingratitude, or weakness. That's the kind of mental tightrope Cha Eun-woo walks daily. And when you're walking a tightrope, silence becomes a survival skill. Fans often describe him as polite, gentle, reserved. But reserve isn't always personality. It's sometimes protection. In interviews, you can notice how carefully he chooses his words, how often he pauses before answering, how he redirects praise back to others. These aren't accidents. They're habits formed in an environment where one wrong sentence can spiral into controversy overnight, and over time, constantly filtering yourself can become exhausting. Let's talk about expectations, because Cha Eun-woo doesn't carry just his own. He carries Astro's legacy, his company's investment, the public's fantasies, and fans' emotional attachment. For many people, he represents comfort, inspiration, even healing. That's a beautiful thing, but it's also a heavy responsibility. What happens when the person who is supposed to comfort millions is the one who needs comfort? There have been moments, small, easy-to-miss moments, where the cracks show. A quiet confession about feeling inadequate. A shy laugh when complimented, as if unsure whether he deserves it. An emotional reaction during a concert or fan meeting that lingers just a second longer than expected. These aren't dramatic breakdowns, and maybe that's why they're so telling. Because Cha Eun-woo doesn't explode. He compresses. Compression is dangerous. When you keep pushing emotions down to maintain an image, they don't disappear. They settle. They weigh. And eventually, they demand space. Silence becomes that space. Not empty silence, but the kind filled with thoughts no one else is allowed to hear. Now let's address something fans rarely like to talk about: loneliness. Yes, Cha Eun-woo is surrounded by people all the time. Staff, members, co-stars, fans. But proximity is not the same as connection. When your life is constantly observed, true privacy becomes rare. When every friendship is analyzed and every interaction is scrutinized, opening up feels risky. Who can you really talk to when everything you say might someday be quoted? In that kind of environment, silence feels safer than honesty. And over time, safety becomes isolation. Acting, ironically, has been both a refuge and a source of pressure for him. Each new role is an opportunity to prove that he is more than his looks, but it also opens him up to harsher criticism. If he does well, people say, of course, he's Cha Eun-woo. If he struggles, the criticism cuts deeper because it confirms the doubts others already had. That constant need to justify your place can chip away at self-confidence, even if the world keeps applauding. And then there's social media, a double-edged sword that gives fans access but also magnifies judgment. Cha Eun-woo's every photo is dissected. His weight, his skin, his expressions, his energy level. Even silence itself becomes a topic. Is he okay? Why does he look tired? Did something happen? Imagine being mentally exhausted and realizing that your exhaustion has become content. Let me pause here and ask you directly. Have you ever felt like you couldn't rest because people expected you to always be on? If you have, then you already understand a piece of his silent days. What makes Cha Eun-woo's situation even more complex is his personality. By all accounts, he is deeply considerate, someone who thinks about how his actions affect others. That kind of empathy, while admirable, often leads to self-neglect. When you're always worried about disappointing others, you stop listening to your own limits, you push through fatigue, you smile through stress. You tell yourself you'll rest later. Later keeps getting postponed. And the industry rewards that behavior. The more you endure, the more reliable you're seen as. The more you smile, the more professional you appear. Until one day, silence becomes the only honest response you have left. There's also the unspoken pressure of time. K-pop and K-drama industries move fast. Youth is currency. Popularity is volatile. Even at the peak of success, there's an underlying fear of replacement. Staying relevant requires constant output, constant visibility. For someone like Cha Eun-woo, whose image is tied so closely to perfection, aging, changing, or slowing down can feel like threats rather than natural processes. In his quieter moments, you can sense the weight of reflection. He often talks about wanting to improve, wanting to be better, wanting to grow. Those are healthy desires, but when improvement turns into obsession, it becomes another form of pressure. Silence, then, becomes a place to breathe, or at least to try. What fans sometimes misunderstand is that silence doesn't always mean something is wrong. Sometimes it means someone is holding themselves together. Sometimes it's the pause between breaths. Sometimes it's the only way to stay sane in a world that never stops demanding more. And yet, even silence has limits. Humans aren't built to carry everything alone. That's why moments when Cha Eun-woo allows vulnerability, even briefly, hit so hard. A shaky voice, moist eyes, a quiet thank you that feels heavier than usual. Those moments remind us that behind the flawless visuals is a young man navigating immense pressure in real time. So what can fans do? The answer isn't to pry deeper or demand explanations. It's to allow space, to support without suffocating, to appreciate without owning, to remember that idols are not emotional vending machines. They don't owe us constant access to their inner worlds. If you're watching this and you've ever felt guilty for needing rest, let Cha Eun-woo's silent days be a mirror rather than a mystery. Success does not cancel stress. Fame does not erase fear. Beauty does not protect against burnout. And silence is not weakness. It's often the language of endurance. Before we end, I want to hear from you. When you think about Cha Eun-woo, do you see the perfection first or the person? Have you noticed his quieter moments, and how do they make you feel? Drop your thoughts in the comments. Let's talk, not gossip. Let's reflect, not speculate. Because sometimes the most important story